בקהילה העילאית, אבקש מקלט עד לעולם. באמצעות המספורים שיצרתי לפני שמיעת אדם, להשיג בודק כדי להועיל לצורך בלתי. לבודה בדם בקהילה העילאית, אבקש מקלט עד לעולם. באמצעות המספורים שיצרתי לפני שמיעת אדם, להשיג בודק כדי לצורך בלתי. Chodam soki chonamla, jamchu bardu danik yaksuchi, daki chonen gibe sonamki, dola penchu sane tumashu. To accomplish my own and others' aim, I generate the mind seeking enlightenment. To accomplish my own and others' aim, I generate the mind seeking enlightenment. Da shen do la du da gi jang chu sem kelo. עמוד 6. וכל בעלי התודעה יקחו באושר ובגורמי האושר. וכל בעלי התודעה ייפרדו מסבל ומגורמי הסבל. וכל בעלי התודעה לעולם לא ייפרדו מאושר וכאב. כל בעלי התודעה יפתחו את מידת ההשתנות, ולא מזור פנים של משהו.
Some Kappa's text just in case, because some bits are interesting. I don't know, yeah, some bits are a little hard to understand, so just in case. The root text itself is not hard to understand. I think it's mainly the commentary. So to not keep you in the dark, I'll try and give you as much as I can explanation of the commentary. But basically where we got to last time was the two first verses. We read those. And then in the explanation underneath the first verse, it's basically just telling you, well, ignorance is the absence, it's not just the absence of insight. It's not just having just not knowing. It's actively misapprehending the opposite of insight. So insight would be realizing emptiness, and now the ignorance is the mind that actively apprehends inherent existence, right? So therefore, it's not the absence of insight, and it's not something different from it. Yeah, it's related to this absence in the sense that it actively apprehends phenomena to exist inherently. And so therefore, we then accumulate different types of karma: meritorious, non-meritorious, and unshakable, or non-fluctuating, or options of body, speech, and mind. Any of those: meritorious, non-meritorious, or unshakable, non-fluctuating. And those are not done on purpose. It's like someone performs actions that lead to rebirth, but this does not entail that the person performs the actions with that aim. We don't do these actions hoping to be reborn in one of those states. Okay. Then he goes on to say, well, having actions. So the second verse on page 536, having actions as its conditions. Consciousness enters transmigration. Once consciousness has entered transmigrations, name and form come to be. So then it goes on to say that, therefore, after there's ignorance, after this action, these actions are carried on or are deposited on consciousness. So these actions are the seat of existence, and then one is reborn again as, for example, a god or a poodle. According to, other actions, actually. This text is not so clear on this one. Basically, it's like the way I described it previously. In the first lifetime, you leave an action to be reborn as a person, or I leave in my example, so leave an action or a seed to be reborn as a person in New Zealand. Then that is left on the consciousness. The consciousness is reborn as a poodle, and the seeds are still on there. And the reason the person is reborn as a poodle has to do with a different occasion of ignorance and actions being that thing. Okay. So when then death ceases, just like the arms have a balance, it's like in accordance with the seed one is left, one is reborn. Yeah, it's kind of a balance. It's kind of balanced out. This is like Karma is a bit like explained like a balance. You know, like something negative happens and there's a result of that. So it's balanced out in that way. Yeah, cause and effect. And then thereafter, so now I'm reborn as a poodle. Thereafter, this is interesting, when the consciousness enters the mother's womb and when it sinks into oblivion, which means in Tibetan the word is actually when it becomes unconscious. So it's like, until your consciousness enters the womb, there is consciousness, because especially there's an intermediate state, and that is not mentioned in here, but it's implied. So when we die, death is so like, you still remember number 1, 2, 3. Number 1, 2, 3, and then I die. So death is like falling asleep. It's like falling asleep. The consciousness becomes subtler and subtler and subtler, and then it becomes very subtle. There's darkness. And then when we sleep, there's what happens usually is like the consciousness becomes subtler and subtler and subtler. There's the coarser levels absorb into the subtler ones, subtler ones, subtler ones. And then for a short time, there's the clear light mind that arises. It stays there for some time. If you have training, it can stay there for 2 weeks. And the person does not die. They just stay, the clear light mind stays with the body. They're dead. I mean, a scientist would say they're dead because there's no heartbeat, there's no blood circulation, no blood pressure, nothing. But what is actually happening, the subtle mind stays at the heart, and there's a little bit of warmth, they say, at the heart. And the person can stay in such a state if they're trained to do so for like 5 days, 10 days. And one of my teachers at the IVD, he passed away about 4 years ago. And when he died, he was in Delek Hospital down in Dharamsala, Miklaganj, Delek Hospital. And at the time we were at Sherbling, at Kagyu Monastery, because part of the IVD study is that you go to the different monasteries and study the different traditions. So we studied the Kagyu tradition for a semester. Anyway, so we were there and we were called to do prayers because he had passed away. So the monks and, some of the few nuns at the school, we took turns being with the body. And he was in that state. He had stayed in the clear light mind for about a week. So we went there, and the body just sat upright, but it was covered. We couldn't see the face. And it was hot. It was monsoon. 80-90% humidity. If he had been dead, he was, dead. It's not like his heart was beating. It was less than that. But his body did not decompose. It didn't decay. Because his mind was still there, the subtle mind was still there, and he kept it. For most people, it's like your coarse mind absorbs into the subtle mind, that's it. And then you leave right away. But he was able to stay in that clear light state for a week. So we sat there, there was no smell, nothing, it was just for a week he was there. And we needed the fan, it was so hot, but he didn't need a fan. And then after 7 days, I forget exactly the time he stayed in that meditation, blood came out of his nose, and then very quickly the body decomposes. Very quickly, then you have to be quick. And within, the next morning he was cremated, the body was cremated. So, but this is like a slow motion of death. This is what they, with the practitioner is so prepared for death that they can actually, go subtler and subtler and subtler and stay with that subtle mind and utilize the mind to realize emptiness for that. Very, very powerful mind. But anyway, so in most cases, it's like the coarser minds absorb into the subtle mind, and then that arises as an intermediate state. Yeah, that's like dreaming. It's sometimes compared to the dreaming. So you rise as an intermediate state being, where you have a type of a little subtler mind than you have right now, right? And you may have even clairvoyance during that time. You may have knowledge of things that you wouldn't have as a human. But it's just a very temporary state. You may even remember your past lives. But here you go, didn't really, then we forget. Yeah. But anyway, so during this intermediate state, they say you can remember even some of your past lifetimes. You have special abilities. You can see the people that, you can hover over your own body basically and see, what you were. And then the karmic force moves you on, and then you eventually will enter, if you're reborn as a human being or a poodle, you're going to be reborn into a womb, into some person's womb. So when that happens, you fall unconscious. Because again, you die, your intermediate state dies, and again the mind becomes very subtle and you fall unconscious. And then, because you don't arise spontaneously, which you can as an intermediate being, but you arise as a human, and because it takes so long for the brain to, the basis now for a course of mind to develop, it takes much longer until you come out of oblivion, or out of this unconscious state. And this is why we only remember much later. Our memory only starts, our mind starts fully functioning only at a certain time. Okay, so I thought this is interesting because it says this, mother's womb. When it goes into the mother's womb and then it sinks into oblivion, which actually the Tibetan word means it falls unconscious. Okay, so then this consciousness then turns into, once it has a form, it becomes the name and form. Okay, the fourth link of name and form. And now it's something weird that is given here, an explanation here, why these four are called name aggregate. Why name? And this is actually to do, Lama Tsongkhapa actually takes the Sanskrit word namyati. Yeah, namyati, it's interesting, the word name. Actually, I think the English word name comes from the Sanskrit, right? Nam, like namyati. So namyati means also like it comes from that what do you call it? Like the syllable, the etymological syllable, like where it comes from is namyati, right? Which can mean name. It can also mean to lead, and it can mean to engage. So Lama Tsongkhapa is trying now to explain why those four mental aggregates, the consciousness, feeling, discrimination, and compositional factor, why they are called name. And he says, well, one way would be that those four lead. So here, namyati meaning lead the person into a certain rebirth, because it's kind of consciousness and everything that goes along with it. So the four aggregates consciousness that leads us to a certain rebirth. So namyati as a name, having the connotation of lead, would explain why it's called name. Does that make sense?
I don't understand.
Okay, so why do we call the four aggregates name? So when I die as a human being, what continues on is really my four aggregates. Do you agree? My four aggregates, I agree. Okay, my four aggregates, the moment they enter the poodle ovum, they become the name aggregates of a poodle. But why would you call them name? Why call those four aggregates name? That's the question. And Lama Tsongkhapa says the word name, this is given in the scriptures. Actually, the word name, in Sanskrit, namyati, so the word namyati can mean name. It can also mean to lead and to engage. So, how do those four aggregates lead? What do they lead? In which sense could you talk about leading? Well, they lead the person to be reborn as a poodle. The human four aggregates are led into the form of a poodle. Yeah, in that sense, there's the leading. Does that make sense now?
No.
Right? In that sense?
I don't understand, because as I understand, these are already the four aggregates of a poodle. They don't lead to the aggregates of a poodle, no?
No, it's a bit like the previously, the four aggregates, they're always called names. So the human four aggregates, the name, they then go and lead us to be reborn somewhere else. What is of the five aggregates? What's being reborn is actually the four aggregates. They're reborn, and they are responsible for leading from one body to the next. So not just talking about the poodle, but just in general. The four aggregates, they go become a poodle. The four aggregates, enter a different body. So they lead they lead themselves basically into different forms.
To the form.
Yeah, to the physical form. Yeah,
It's called name because they lead to an object which will, its appearance will have a name.
No, because the
Why?
word namyati can also mean to lead. The word name in Sanskrit.
So only because they lead, okay.
Yeah. So the Sanskrit word namyati means name, it means to lead, and it means to engage. Right? So this is like that. He's saying, well, name, why would you call those four names? That's weird. So then he says, well, the word leading maybe comes from the explanation of leading, kind of leading to different physical bodies. Or another explanation is that it's because of those four, and in particular discrimination, right? Discrimination that kind of looks at itself and identifies itself as I'm so and so. Right? Here it says, or because through discrimination they engage consciousness with the object. With which object? Engage discrimination as this is me, this is who I am. Right? Engage with the object, so discrimination. Anyway, this is, it says in the small print, it's not very clear in Sanskrit, and in Tibetan it's just not either. It's like, what are they talking about? Right? It's really not that clear in neither language, not in Tibetan, because this was composed by Lama Tsongkhapa in Tibetan. But Lama Tsongkhapa knew Sanskrit very well, so this is where this explanation comes from.
But the second explanation actually describes labeling, doesn't it?
Not labeling, but just before you label, you discriminate.
Yeah.
This and that, yeah.
And
But
then it will come to labeling, the discrimination.
yeah, exactly. That will lead to labeling, absolutely. So I'm this, I'm that, you know, like I'm so and so. Give yourself a name. You have yourself, yeah, like a label almost. Yeah, Ming in Tibetan, yeah, label. So that again comes through discrimination, you know, distinguishing I and others and so forth. Anyway, it's not so clear. I'm not like 100% sure. It's like some of those texts, they leave room for interpretation. They're not 100% clear. You can see it this way or another way. Anyway. Pardon? The whole sentence?
What is name in Tibetan?
Ming. M-I-N-G. Ming. So if you ask, what's your name? You ask, Ming Kare. What's your name? You don't say Kare before, you say it after. Okay. So Ming means name, and Nam Kya He. In Sanskrit, Nam Kya He, what is your name? Nam means name, Kya means what, He means is. What, you know, name what is, so what is your name? Okay. And then it says form includes, so form basically, so here it talks about form all the time. It's the form aggregate, the physical aggregate. And this is a funny translation because it says embryo. Embryo is not the physical aggregate. Embryo is the whole person, right? With the body. So it's here the embryo form. Yeah. When we talk about the fourth element, the name and form, it's not the grown child. It's just in the very beginning, the embryo, the fetus. Yeah, the fetus form. Does that make sense? Yeah, but the four aggregates in the beginning, we talk about the four aggregates in the womb, the beginning of the womb. And that's not a body like not even a baby's body. It's like a fetus. It's like a, you know, mass of cells in it with a different shape. Okay. So this is, I hope, explains this commentary. So then he goes on to say, number 3, verse number 3. Once name and form come to be, the 6 senses come into being. Depending on the 6 senses, contact comes into being. Right? So, as we've explained, from link number 4, we move on to link number 5 and link number 6. And so it's basically the same. When the 4 name aggregate and such things as the embryo form come into being, then slowly the senses, which are the doors to the arising of suffering, come into being. Right? Our doors to the world, and of course, our world, our nature is our reality is in the nature of problems, in the nature of suffering. They are the 6 senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, in the introspective sense. In other words, the mental consciousness. Yeah, it's just given the name. Not all mental consciousness is an introspective mind. So it's just taking one specific mental consciousness, such as the introspective sense or the internal mind, which arise from name and form as conditions. So first there were name and form. Of course, the mental consciousness was always there. But the 6 conditions, all 6 of them, the 6 sense spheres, yeah, they all come from first the state when there was when all the 6 were not there, the collection of the 6 weren't there, and it was just name and form. It was just a mental consciousness and some physical form. And then slowly that arose into the person having all the 6 sense faculties. One was always there, but not all 6. Okay. Although the physical, which means external forms and so forth, the physical, such as form, here physical doesn't mean the body, it means the objects of the senses. Although the physical and mental organs, which means the mental consciousness, exist prior to this, the collection of the 6 arises at this point. In other words, before you had the 6 sense spheres, you had a mental consciousness. You had the objects of the five sense consciousnesses, right? Sight, sounds, all that was there. But you couldn't have an eye consciousness, an ear consciousness, and so forth, because you didn't have eye and optical nerve and eardrum and all that. That wasn't there. So some of the causes were there already, but the last kind of missing link wasn't there, the six sense spheres. They weren't present. And that is why they're mentioned at this stage, right? They're mentioned at this stage because just having a mental consciousness, just having objects such as colors, shapes, sounds, is not enough for all our five sense consciousnesses to rise. It's important to mention that we need the physical basis. Yeah? So this is why this link is specifically mentioned. Otherwise, we didn't have to mention it. Okay. Afterwards, so thereafter, depending on the six senses, contact arises. So now how does contact arise and what is its nature? So then verse number 4. That is only dependent on eye and form and retention. Okay, retention here is a funny translation for the word remembering consciousness. Remembrance. And again, remembrance is just a type of mental consciousness. Yeah, again, I don't know why they took out, the specific kind of instance of a mental consciousness. And a remembering mind. A remembering mind can only be a mental consciousness. You don't remember anything with your eye consciousness. Right? A remembering consciousness is a conceptual mind. And the eye consciousness can never be conceptual. It's always direct. Mm-hmm. Conceptual means you can think about things that have already passed. You can only do that with a mental consciousness. You can only reflect upon the past with a remembering consciousness. And that is a mental consciousness. So basically what this is saying that contact is dependent only on eye, form, and mental consciousness. Right? So we see, you remember the three we had there? The eye is the eye sense power. The form is the shape and color. And the retention is the immediately preceding condition, the mental consciousness, which was there before. Yeah? Do you remember that?
Yeah, but it was there before, but if there is no contact, the consciousness cannot...
First you need those three to then make contact.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's almost like simultaneous. You have those three and then they come together. Yeah? If you think of the list of the three, I mean, I can get up if you need to see, but if you don't need to see it, then it's the empowering condition. Yeah? Then there's the, what was it called? Oh, maybe that's, yeah. Just write it one. Thanks. So you have number 1, the observed object condition, the shape and color. Okay, so that's form here. Okay, that is only dependent on, so what is contact dependent on? Only on form, well, eye is the eye sense power, empowering condition. Form means shape and color. And then retention means a specific kind of memory, in other words, an immediately preceding condition in the sense of former mental consciousness. Now, having those three, they make contact. They have to be ready to then get contact, right? That's dependent on name and form. So, on name and form, consciousness arises. Yeah. So, dependent on first there was name and form, then the 6 sense spheres, and depending on that, now you can have the consciousness, the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and so forth. Yeah? Contact, in other words. That which is assembled from the 3, eye, form, and consciousness, is contact. From contact, feeling comes to be. Is this clear? If it's not clear, please say. Yes?
I don't understand the remembering. You're talking about the last moment, the previous...
Okay. If you look at this one, the immediately preceding condition, a former moment of consciousness, like you don't have, the only thing you can have then, before you have your eye consciousness, you can only have a memory of a form. You can't have anything else, because you can't see forms yet. So of course I actually don't have a memory, but this is like saying, you can't have any new information from the outside. All you could be having would be like a memory. So a memory just means a mental consciousness. It's just another word for mental consciousness. So mental consciousness, right, at this point, what is it going to perceive, that mental consciousness? There's no door to the outside, no sign, no new sights, no new sounds, nothing, right? Before the actual contact. So all you can have is maybe memory of what you've seen in the previous life. Yeah? So this is why, but I mean, of course, actually there is no memory. But it's just giving that as an example. You can't see the present because the doors to the outside world have not been developed. So if you want to do anything, all you have is memory. Does that make sense?
Yes, but once you see it, so is it a new experience? Or
Yes.
Because it's
No. That's not. No, this is a new experience. But here we're not even talking about a new experience. We have no door to the outside world yet. And then when you for the first time see it, then you see it, and then mentally it's, you think about it, and then slowly becomes a memory, because whatever you've taken as your object then becomes a memory. But we're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about before you can even perceive any form, any sight, any sound, anything. You have a mental consciousness. So what is the object of the mental consciousness? Well, all it can be is, if you really want to insist on this mental consciousness takes on form, it can only be a memory of a form. Does that make sense? This is what's meant. But don't take it too, it's just I don't know why Nagarjuna, this is Nagarjuna's text. The verse is, of course, Nagarjuna's text. I don't know why he calls it memory. Yeah, you could just say mental consciousness. Yeah. Yes.
Before, name is the same as meaning, or here is the name already? The meaning of name here.
Well, you see, it's just the etymology. So at some point it was let. Now the name is just continued on. So whatever is the reason for calling it that. Sometimes it's not leading anything. It's already let. It's already in there. Yeah, but it's just because previously, oftentimes you give a name to something, there's an etymology of the word, but it doesn't actually describe the word so much. Yeah, there's a lot of instances like that in Sanskrit or in Tibetan. Okay, is this clear so far? Is it any question? No? We want to make sure you really understand this. So, anyway, so then the explanation here, and again it's really weird. So the visual consciousness arises. So now Lama Tsongkhapa takes just the one example, the visual consciousness. It arises depending on the I, which is the sense power, the empowering condition. He calls it the dominant condition. It's the empowering condition, dominant condition. Then the material form, which is the observed object condition. And retention, or remembering, or actually should be better, mental consciousness, holding in the mind, so mental consciousness, just holding it mentally. The immediate condition, or the immediately preceding condition. So these are the three. So here it says, the immediate cause, or the immediately preceding condition, retention, for example, he's actually clarifying, just remembrance, for example. Yeah, it doesn't have to be remembrance, it can just be just a mental consciousness, whatever its object is. Gives rise to visual consciousness. So it gives rise and depends on the four name aggregates, feeling and so forth, because there was a mental consciousness before, and that mental consciousness had all the four aggregates there, right? Because you remember, a mental consciousness must have feeling, must have discrimination, must have all the other mental factors. So whenever you have a mental consciousness, you have the four names, you have the four aggregates. Yeah? Whenever you have a mental consciousness, that's when you have. And the mental consciousness must precede the I consciousness. Okay, so the immediate gives rise to visual consciousness depending on the four names, the four name aggregates. And the first two conditions that were mentioned before, as such as material form and such as material form. So the outside form and the sense spaces. Does that make sense? Yeah. So those two. Their condition is the joining of the three. This is kind of Tibetan style in those days, It's like, they make these complicated sentences just to repeat what they've said before. And we think, oh, it must be something, it's such a complicated sentence, it must mean something else that we said before. But it just says the same thing differently. Their condition is the joining of the three, name, form, and consciousness. And this is the characteristic of contact. It arises in the same way that consciousness does. So it's in the same way as I consciousness arises, contact arises. When you have I consciousness, you have contact, in other words.
Contact between consciousness and the...
Contact between those
senses.
three. Between those three. The shape, the observed empowering condition, and the former moment of consciousness. When these are there, you can have contact. In other words, you have an I consciousness. That's the coming together. You have the coming together of an external form you have the coming together of this form, right? It's basically just a reflection of this external object enters my retina, yeah? There was a former moment of consciousness, at that time there's also a moment of consciousness, and then the next moment, eye consciousness arises, contact of those three. So just as an eye consciousness arises, contact arises, it's the same thing, right? The eye consciousness associated with contact arises at the same time as the eye consciousness does. Okay, and now the English is very weird. I'll read you my version. The other 5 kinds of contact should be understood in the terms of the joining of the 3, in the same way, right? The object, the sense power, and consciousness. Just as with the visual consciousness. Just as with the visual consciousness, the other 5 work likewise. It says in contact through the visual assemblage. I mean, that's, I don't know how that's, it's just in Tibetan it says, just as before, with the eye consciousness, the remaining, senses work the same way. When the 3 join, the 3 kinds of objects, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, are discerned. So this is quite interesting, that actually it's saying that before feeling arises, we actually, when there's contact, there's a tiny moment where we actually discern nice, not nice, neutral. And then we experience that. So there's a moment of discernment, right? Pleasure, displeasure, neutrality. Yeah? Kind of just noting, nice, not nice. And then there's a real feeling arising. Yeah. Yes?
Exactly the same moment of perceiving.
I guess, yes. So it's like the moment you perceive it, there's already, and of course I think as a baby it's different. I mean, especially when you're like, in this process now, it's, even though it's actually happening in the womb, the first moment, but then if you go out throughout our lives, through labeling, then we label, the labeling takes in, and then we go, oh, that's nice, that's not nice, so and then the next moment we actually feel pleasure and not pleasure. You see, like, for example, if we just think of our own experience, a person walks into the room, and, maybe someone we are very attracted to. For a split second we think attraction, and then a feeling of happiness arises, right? Or there's our favorite food, someone brings in our favorite cake or something, right? And there's a moment of discernment. Oh, wonderful cake, favorite cake. And then a feeling of happiness arises. It's just a tiny moment.
But I don't understand if the
Contact?
if in the minute of the context it's already the
Discernment.
discrimination between those 3, if it's pleasant or not pleasant or neutral.
Mhm.
Or first I see something and then a minute afterwards
A minute? I don't think it takes a minute. But- Just shortly afterwards. It's not so clear on that. It really, strictly speaking, you would have to say there's the coming together, then there's discernment, and then there is feeling. But our discernment, it's not the kind of coarse discernment where we actually mentally think about or reflect upon something. It's very quick. It's almost like you look at the cup and you see it. The moment you close your eyes, you look at it, and you don't need a moment to think, to kind of see this different from this. It's just automatic.
At the first minute, in worst case, it will be neutral. It doesn't have to have, you don't have to have a gap of time.
No, she's talking about the feeling.
I know.
No, you're talking about the feeling, but she's talking about contact and discernment.
Yeah.
Whether there's a moment between contact and discernment.
Until the feeling arises.
Yeah.
No.
And I'm saying,
Until the discernment arises. What is discernment?
What's discernment?
Efrana.
So it's connected to what? It's not connected to the feeling, it's connected to what? It's in mental?
Yes, you see, remember we talked about like a mental consciousness, any consciousness always comes along with mental factors, right? There's discernment or discrimination, sometimes called discrimination, discernment, that's one mental factor. Then there's feeling, there's contact, there's intention, attention. And so actually they say they arise together, we say they arise together, but really, this is what Lior is saying, for example, like there may be just a neutral feeling, and there's a moment of contact, and then the next moment there's a feeling of happiness. So this is too complicated. This is very, very complicated subject, actually. This is exactly where confusion always arises, because we say all 5 are present, but when we look at it, when it comes down to it, there seems to be a sequence, right? There seems to be a sequence in which they arise, and both are true. there's both are true because there's a specific contact, a specific discrimination, a specific, feeling. They arise with respect to a certain object. They arise in the step-by-step process. They can, don't have to, yeah. But then, just in general, they're always present, yeah. But then they can have different objects. So this is a little complicated. If I go into this, we can go on for a whole week on just this. This is a subject matter. No, I'm glad you ask, but it's good because now you know there's more to study. Mental factors, mind and mental factors. There's a whole subject. There's the book by Nati Rinpoche, and there's several other books dealing with mind and mental factors. It's all about understanding the mind better. But I have the tendency to think, yeah, there's the moment of contact, and maybe together with that, or maybe a split second after, there's discernment, right? A recognition, but a very subtle recognition, and then there's feeling. So it really seems to be contact, discernment, feeling. Yes.
There is a book called Destructive Emotions.
By whom?
It's a conference with the Dalai Lama and Daniel Goleman.
Yes.
There is a chapter there. They made experiments about it. So they see that in the first 100 or 200 milliseconds,
Millisecond, like tiny, yeah.
there is only contact, no discrimination, just the eye register something.
There you go.
After that,
There's
they see in the brain a lot of functioning, which they show that there is a recognition of the object.
Yes, but this is like actually the recognition that you're talking about. It seems to be more like a course of recognition. Here it's just a very subtle, but never mind. So there seems to be a step-by-step kind of procedure. You can still say that the mental factors are all active because their function is there. They may not be totally already, doing their job, but the function is all there to feel, to have, all that. Yeah, but as I said, this is not the scope of this class to really go and investigate each mental factor and how they, but let's just leave it at that. There's contact, there's a tiny discrimination, like a second of discerning, pleasurable or nice, not nice, attractive, not attractive, neutral, and then there's a feeling. Yeah? Does that make sense? And for the 12 things, I think this is sufficient right now. It's great that this comes up because you're not going to stop here, you're going to go back and know something else that you could pay attention to. So, okay. Alright, so when the three kinds of objects, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, are discerned. Thereafter, through contact, in accord with the discernment, so in accordance with what we've discerned previously, in terms of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral objects, pleasant and neutral objects, respectively, these three lead to feeling of pleasure, suffering, or indifference. Yeah? So having discerned into pleasurable, non-pleasurable, then there's actual feeling arising. Okay. The other 5 sets of feelings, so the remaining 5 consciousnesses, this is still just dealing with the I consciousness. So the remaining 5 consciousnesses work exactly the same way. Just as the I consciousness must have those 3 coming together, then there's a moment of discernment, and then there's feeling. Likewise, the same applies to the other 5 consciousnesses. There's 3 conditions that come together. There's contact, therefore. Coming together means contact. There's a discernment, and then there's a feeling.
Why the other 5?
The other 5 are the 4 other sense consciousnesses and mental consciousness.
So the mental is also empowering?
The mental consciousness, of course, it was there already. But let's say when all other 5 are there. So if you have for the first time the collection of all 6.
Mm-hmm.
So then, let's say when all 6 are ready, you can talk about the mental consciousness at that time. So the mental consciousness at that time needs an observed object condition. It needs an object. But it doesn't need a physical empowering condition. So the empowering condition in the case of the mental consciousness is the former mental consciousness. And the immediately preceding condition is also the former mental consciousness. So number 2 and 3 are the same. So you don't need a physical basis for a mental consciousness to arise. All you need is a former moment of consciousness. consciousness, plus an object. The object you always need.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Something I don't understand because if the whole being commandments, yes, if you have
So it is not coming from nothing. I mean,
It doesn't come from nothing. Oh, it comes from beginningless lifetimes. You see, our mind doesn't need to be taught to think. Our mind doesn't need to be taught to discern. It's not everything that we do we need to learn. There's certain things we need to learn as children and so forth. But even in the womb, it happens automatically.
yes, but
Pleasurable and non-pleasurable, you can discern.
this I cannot understand. But,
Yeah.
I cannot understand why does something makes me happy or not happy. Why it's nice or not nice. I mean, if the example that a person is passing and immediately he is attractive and immediately I think this makes me pleasure.
Mhm.
So for Liora, it could be that he is very, very
Unattractive.
unattractive.
Sure.
So there is something that arises that makes me to be with this feeling or not. I mean,
It's not that it's, yeah.
the ability to discrimination.
Yeah.
I understand that it's involved.
there.
It's
Yes.
something that it's limitless life.
Yeah.
This I cannot. It's like exercising something.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, but specifically,
Mhm.
why does
Because
for
he
me?
tortured me previously.
Pardon?
He tortured me in my previous life. That's why he's unattractive to me immediately.
So what do you suggest that?
I'm missing something there. I mean, like, for example, let me give the example. In the womb, you know, the mother eats a lot of chili, right? So right in the womb, whatever fluid comes into the body, you know, ooh, there's a discomfort. So the baby in the womb can feel already pleasure, displeasure, really loud music, the vibration.
Okay,
Right?
this is universal.
That's universal.
And
And then when you're born, you know, and then due to education, due to everything, you know, everything that comes together, I don't know, you listen to Hindi music and you go, oh. But you listen to Rita, I know she's a singer. You listen to Rita and you go, woo, yeah, pleasant. Not that everyone has a different kind of experience of this, but due to our habituation and everything, when I listen to the sound of the singer Rita, I go, there was a misunderstanding between Anya Rita and the singer, so this is where it comes from actually. But anyway, so because of the sound, you know, first the sound, there's a short discernment, oh, nice music, and the feeling of happiness arises. Does that make sense? And for me, maybe, yeah.
Of course, I was confused because of course there is subjective. I mean, everybody is in
Subjective.
some culture and etc. This is of course.
Right.
Just I couldn't understand the first when you are a baby, etc. That it happens that so you are saying that it is universal. So
Certain things are.
and then when we are growing up, so we choose what to like or not to like, etc.
I mean, even the womb is not universal. If in your previous life you listened to Rita all day long, if your mom now listens in this lifetime to Rita, you may have a feeling of happiness, right? In your previous life, I mean, you bring the whole baggage with you, all your imprints of liking the singer Rita. So it's possible that, you know, while in the womb, your mother listens to really loud Rita music and you go, wow. Whereas, you know, someone else goes, ooh, you know?
So the imprints are activating
Already in the womb.
already, they are here
Yes.
and they are involved in this
Even as a
process.
fetus. Why should they not ripen then? It's not like only when you're born they start ripening. No, they can ripen already then. And determine what you like and what you dislike.
And you accumulate karma?
And you accumulate karma. bloody mother, stop that, Rita. I mean, no, I'm just kidding. But, you know, it's already something happening, yes.
Okay, so each moment,
Mm-hmm.
it's a result of limitless moments with limitless imprints.
Absolutely. נכון.
בסדר.
בסדר. טוב, בסדר. גדול or whatever. Anyway, never mind. Okay, so I hope we don't have any bagalan gadolos. Balagan. Shani told me, balagan gadol. Okay, anyway, never mind. So, now this is important, yes. So it's really important to understand that this is not a blank sheet. We have the sense of a child's like a blank sheet. No, there's no blank sheet. It's this whole, continuation of lots of, imprints. And they can already write, and certain things are gone, such as language and so forth. But still the imprints, are there. So some children, if they've done, maybe in their previous life, done a lot of work in terms of language, they find it easier to learn a language, just depending on where people come from. So you can see already an ability. Some children find it easier to learn something, others not that easy. But even in the womb, there's already quite something happening, a like and a dislike. Some children move a lot, others less. Yeah, there's reasons for that. Okay. So thus, pleasure, feeling, indifferent. The other 5 sets are exactly the same. So the other 5 sets of feeling, it works in the same way. So the remaining 4, plus the mental consciousness, they're the same. So being conditioned by contact through, just as with the visual kind of example. And that's the Sutra Sambuchaya, that's Nagarjuna's text. Kundu in Tibetan, or Sutra Sambuchaya in Sanskrit. They said that those that are propelled are 4. Okay, so name and form, the 6 senses, contact and feeling. Those 4 are propelled by the previous 3. Ignorance, compositional action, and consciousness. Those 3 now propel karma. Karma is number 2. So compositional action is another word for karma. So number 1, so you have different words for number 2, for link number 2. Sometimes action, karma, compositional action, volitional action, so many different words. But basically, ignorance leads to karma. Karma leads to consciousness, or more precisely, the causal consciousness. And then that propels what is called the 4 propelling results, which are the resultant consciousness, which is explained a little down, then name and form, the 6 senses, contact and feeling. Yeah, so this is, you can divide the 12 links into 4. The propelling causes, which are 2.5. Ignorance, karma, causal consciousness. These are the propelling causes. Then resultant consciousness, name and form, 6 sense spheres.
Contact and feeling.
Contact and feeling, there's the propelled results. Okay? This includes the resultant consciousness. Here you go, here. That those that are propelled, so the results of the propelling first 2.5 are 4, name and form, 6 senses, contact and feeling, and this includes the resultant consciousness. Okay.
Also, before that, in page 536, you have your sentence.